good people of Nelson, and welcome to this edition of Meet the New Candidates. First, I'd like to share a few not so fun facts from the Nelson Town Crier. Nelson City Council debt is forecast to be $131 million by this time next year and $153 million in 4 years' time. This would mean every ratepayer owes $6,708. The long-term plan says in 2018-19 year, Nelson City Council will be paying $8 million in interest per annum alone. This equates to 13.3% of rates income. Nelson will be the 11th most indebted council out of 67 in the country. Tasman is 8th. Nelson City Council tells us that the money we are borrowing is to fund infrastructure projects. However, 37% of total expenditure is on parks and active recreation or economic development activities. Is this acceptable? Councillor McGurk had this to say on debt at the 2nd of June meeting. There needs to be a very big distinction between government debt and private debt. However, the only difference I see is I have a say in how much private debt I take on. However, it would seem I have no say in how much debt council chooses to load on me. Pick up issue 4 of the Town Crier to find out more about debt and councillor attendance records and how you feel about both of those. Please stay tuned after the interviews to hear Steve Cross, the editor of Town Crier, speak to the council meeting on the 18th of August about the Stoke Community Centre yet to be built and the issues it faces. Derek Nees, thanks for coming. You're running as a candidate in the local elections. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Certainly. I grew up in, or was born and grew up in Takaka, which is not far from here, delightful spot. And I was come from dairy farming stock. At the age I was involved in farming in my early working life. I was in partnership with my father for a period. I had a contracting business in Takaka for a period of time. And then I sold my business and I thought, well, now I'm single, what am I going to do? So I thought, I've already done some territorial service in the army, so okay, I'll join the army for 3 years. So I joined the army for 3 years and ended up staying for 20. Got out as a warrant officer class 1. It was my whole service was in the trade of transport. Transport and logistics, and I had some delightful tours while I was in the army, places like the Antarctic and Britain and Europe, wow. Singapore and places like that. So thoroughly enjoyed that, but of course time comes when you've got to get out into the wild world. So I came back to Nelson because my father was still alive in Takaka, so we decided we wanted some time with him. So by then I'd got married to Leanne and had 2 young boys, primary school age, so we moved back to Nelson. And I went to work for TNL. First of all, I went back to driving after having gone up through the ranks in the army, and now I'm there as a driver trainer, project manager, whatever else they want me to do. I'm the go-to guy when nobody else wants to do it.
Usually ends up the way.
Yeah, I've got two sons still living in Nelson. One's married with 3 children, and so they're living in Nelson. So I've got a long-term interest in Nelson.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And can you tell us a little bit about why should people vote for you?
Well, I come from a family background of local body involvement. My father was the chairman of Golden Bay County Council back in the early 80s for a period of time. In fact, way back just after the Second World War, he was on the Takaka Town Board. Now that's really going back. His father was a member of the Golden Bay Dairy Company, director. He was also the chairman of the Golden Bay Electric Power Board for a period of time. And then all of the family in Marlborough have been involved at some point, right back to my great-grandfather, in local bodies or power boards. Wow. I don't know what the power board attraction is, but there's something there. So I said before, I've got a long-term interest in Nelson, and I've got grandchildren growing up here. And if there's one thing that I don't want to happen is when I'm old and grey and like sitting in my rocking chair, I don't want my grandchildren to come to me and say, Granddad, you saw what was happening but you didn't do anything about it. Why?
Nice call.
And that's really is one of the main reasons why I want to get in there and do this. I stood last time, I missed out. I believe that I can pull it off this time with the help of the people.
Yeah, of course. Derek, we've got some random questions from the people on the street. We've got questions from Stormy, Simon and Hank, and we'd like you to see them and give them some answers.
Okay.
With increased scientific evidence coming in every year that points to the fact that climate change is going to be one of our most challenging issues, probably facing us a lot sooner than most people think. I would like to know what the councillors plan to do to help make Nelson a more resilient society.
Stormy, that's a really good question, and I think it's one that's teasing a lot of people all around the world and around New Zealand at the moment. As a councillor, I would continue to do what the council is doing, and that is working towards making people understand that there is an issue. I think that in terms of the environment and the air quality, we are improving that all the time. Technology in vehicles now, and I come from a road transport background, so I do know that technology in the vehicles now is creating far more environmentally friendly exhaust fumes. Like, for example, in some of our trucks now we've got a stuff called AdBlue, which actually neutralises the nitrous oxide in the exhaust fumes before it leaves the muffler and comes out the exhaust. So there's a lot of work going on in terms of technology in motor vehicles. As far as sea rise, we've just got to keep a fairly close eye on that.
With the infrastructural mess which is Auckland and the proposed road system to go through out of Nelson towards Richmond and Stoke, why don't we put in a light railway system to link up Stoke, Richmond and Nelson Central rather than having another road?
Simon, that's a very good question, and I've often reflected on why we got rid of the railway that we had here back in the 50s. And I can remember as a very young child staying at my grandparents in Herbert Street in Richmond, looking out the sunroom window and seeing the train go past down on the old railway. If we still had that way there, then we could certainly put a light rail in. Now that all that's gone, I'm at a loss as to understand where we would actually put that. So whilst it would be nice, I think that the way has gone, but I think the way forward is buses. If we're talking about public transport, I think the way forward is actually bus traffic.
And my question is in regards to the use of glyphosates in the form of Roundup in the parks and reserve. So why does the council approve of that for the users in the areas I just stated?
So Hank, my answer to that is that I'm not too sure why the council is using Roundup. As a councillor, I would inquire as to why we can't use more environmentally biodegradable sprays, because they are around. I use them myself at home around the edge of the paths and places where I can't get to with a lawnmower. So I certainly don't use Roundup. So there are sprays available, perhaps not quite as long lasting, but certainly a lot more environmentally friendly.
Derek, they were great questions and fantastic answers from yourself. Have you got any other points or issues you'd like to raise for the people to hear?
Essentially, I've just got a few little points that I want to go through, but I want to really emphasise that I'm not seeking to get on council to take any personal projects in there. I've got no really fantastic ideas about what I want to do personally. I reiterate the point, I'm one vote. I'm one voice, one vote, and to get anything done, we have to actually have more than one vote, one voice. So I've got no fantastic views about fantastic projects that I want to take into council. Some of the things that I do want to look at is control of debt and reduction of debt, because as we know in personal life, we can't keep borrowing our way out of trouble. So we need to actually find ways where we can pay down that debt. I know when we look at the pre-election report that it looks very, very nice. And the Standard & Poor's rating and everything is quite nice to look at, but we don't really want to draw on that if we don't have to. But in saying that, I believe that councils should be holding their rates increases to the cost price index, CPI, because in our own homes we can't go spending more than what we earn. And you know, the housewife knows more than anybody else. So why should councils be able to gouge people to get themselves out of trouble? And I don't think that's quite right. And so therefore I will vote to keep rate rises to the CPI, and I will hold to that. Once again, I'm only one vote and one voice. I think councils should concentrate on core activities. Councils should collect rates, collect charges, and build, maintain and improve infrastructure and public facility. They shouldn't be engaging in business. They shouldn't be engaging in business startups. They should be creating an environment, an economic environment in which business wants to come and invest. And that's what council should be about. Not actually running businesses in opposition to the businesses that they want to come and get here and set up here. What they can do is make it more user-friendly to come into our city and set up a business, and make it more user-friendly for them to stay in that particular place. I don't want to see any more Trafalgar Centre fiascos. I believe that Kerry Neal and his associates are due an apology, and if I was elected to council, I would make sure that I did my best to ensure that that happened. And let's bury the past and say that's it. But if people had listened in the first stages, then perhaps we wouldn't be in the position we are now. Very disappointing to find that after they've done their appraisal and said they're going to paint the roof, and then they come back and say, oh no, the roof needs replacing. Well, who was the specialist that didn't tell us the true story at the start? We need to strengthen the governance and control within council, and I think that we need to have another look at the code of conduct, and so we need to go through that again. I think it hasn't had a decent look at it. And in concluding, I can say that I support the process that NZTA are going through as far as Nelson's traffic congestion issues and future issues are concerned. I support that process because I am part of it as a representative of the road transport industry. I also support the building of a new state highway if that's the conclusion that comes out of this process. So I'm keen to see that process continue. I'm keen to see people come down on whichever side of the fence they want to come down on and decide whether they would support or not support a new state highway.
Great. Derek Nees, thanks very much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you, Graham.
Nelson Tire Center. Great prices, great service. Buy your own Bryford trailer. All types, all sizes.
Hi, I'm Colin from Nelson Tire Centre. Come on down for a good deal.
I'm Kip Mailing and I'm standing for Mayor of Tasman. First of all, I'd just like to give you a bit of my background. I spent 24 years in the police and 12 years orcharding, and I returned to Tasman to live some 18 years ago because I had an elderly father that we wanted to be close to. I'm standing for Mayor because I want to make a difference to our district. I'm concerned about what is happening with our current council. They're not focused on core services. They've also increased staff hugely over the last 9 years. What's happened in Mapua, with an overspend of $500,000 and $1.8 million on a commercial building, is not core services and should not have been done. There are plenty of developers in Nelson and Tasman that would have built that building and not involved ratepayers' money. It's an indictment on this council that we can't fix stormwater in Motueka and flooding issues in Murchison, and we're spending $1.8 million on a commercial building. That should not happen. So I want to see a council that is focused on core services. Rates affordability is another issue, and the increase in staffing has caused part of this problem. Rates should not go up above inflation, and in the last 9 years they've gone up above inflation every year. This year they went up 1%, inflation is running at 0.4. The next subject I want to discuss is our environment. I'm a keen trout fisherman and I also go sea fishing. We need jobs and we need to improve our environment as well, and that means protecting our waterways and ensuring that we're not damaging our environment with our development. I also support the Lee Valley Dam. I have been involved in irrigation for a number of years, and if we don't build this dam soon, we will lose funding from government. They are looking at putting in a considerable sum of money to help irrigators fund this project, and it will also provide water for Richmond. Without the dam, we have 1,000 jobs at risk on the Waimea Plains. That will affect our economy hugely and our district. And the last subject I'd like to really talk with you this morning is the Southern Link. It is increasingly difficult to get in and out of Nelson from Tasman. When I came to Nelson as a 10-year-old 50 years ago, there was talk of the Southern Link then. Our population has increased hugely, and it can now take an hour to get from Nelson City to the other side of Richmond. We need to improve the flow of and volume of traffic from our key infrastructure areas, the port. The one way to do that is with the Southern Link. So I won't have met all you people. We have a difficult district to get around, but I've spent time in Murchison in the last few days. I've also been at Lake Rotoiti, I go to Motueka, I've been to Golden Bay, and over the next few weeks I'll be visiting every district and every township that I can, and I would seek your support to bring the Tasman district back into focus on core services, affordability of rates, improving our environment, and the Southern Link. Thank you for listening to me.
Kinja, thanks for coming along. You're running in the local elections as a candidate. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi there. Yes, well, it's nice to be here. Well, people will probably know me because I run the Victory Community Centre. I was there at the beginning, helping it get happening, and been there ever since. I've also, I'm really proud of being involved with the Nelson Tasman Housing Trust, and lots of people again will probably have seen me in the press over the years, bringing those celebrations about the number of houses we've been able to build. Been living in Nelson coming up 14 years, and it's a great place to live.
That's great. And Kinja, why should the people vote for you?
Why should they vote for me? Well, I know the community. Working in the community sector, there's lots of different layers to all sorts of organisations and people and activities that are going on. So, I've been pretty deeply embedded in community ever since I arrived here. I love the sense that there's a lot of richness around the multiple ways in which Nelson has an economy. We're not just a dairying town. We've got all these different forestry and seafood, and so that whole sense of the foundation of us is strong, and yet I see there's still lots of opportunities for other businesses to come in here. Tourism is strong, and we're continuing to add value to that around our cycleways and the ways in which we engage with all the beautiful places around Nelson. And I believe I can help make a difference.
That's great, Kinja. And we've got some questions, random questions from the street.
Cool.
We got them from Stormy, Simon and Hank. So could you please answer these questions for us?
Yeah, I'd be delighted.
Okay.
With increased scientific evidence coming in every year that points to the fact that climate change is going to be one of our most challenging issues, probably facing us a lot sooner than most people think. I would like to know what the councillors plan to do to help make Nelson a more resilient society.
Stormy, that's a really interesting question, and it's a huge one, and it's a very challenging one. I know that a community group around Nelson called NelSust has done some really good modelling, and I know that council already knows some of the challenges that Nelson faces. Resilient communities is a really interesting question, and I believe that a resilient community primarily has people safely housed, that they don't have to be worrying about their survival needs on a daily basis. So that's a slightly a side issue, but that's all the ways in which we can build a community which knows where to go, how to respond. But I genuinely think, the tide is coming in, and I think probably faster than we know. So we have to really start planning very carefully and using really good science to give us some ways in which to do that. There are some really good scientists even within council and who have resources right across the whole of New Zealand and the world, and ways in which that other countries have responded to these issues. And that is very much a part of my wanting to be on council, is to actually get behind the ways in which we're developing a much longer term plan, building resiliency from the community up.
With the infrastructural mess which is Auckland, and the proposed road system to go through out of Nelson towards Richmond and Stoke, why don't we put in a light railway system to link up Stoke, Richmond and Nelson Central, rather than having another road?
Simon, this is another good question. In fact, I remember perhaps before the last general election, the Green Party came to our community centre in Victory, and asked us to, sort of host them for a bit of a walk up the Wairau Reserve. And one of their ideas at the time was to actually assess whether light rail could be an option, and whether some of our community might support that. And I think in principle it's a great idea. The biggest challenge of all is that the cost of it is absolutely astronomical, and I think even the early modelling that was done during that time by some of the scientists connected in there was that the cost benefit could never be really rationalised. So I think in the longer term, if we had a bigger population and some better evidence about that, light rail would be a great option actually, but just not cost effective.
And my question is in regards to the use of glyphosates in the form of Roundup in the parks and reserve. So why does the council approve of that for the users in the areas I just stated?
Hank, I know that there's a local community group, and I can't remember their name, I'm sorry, but they have been advocating for the use of like the steam system that was installed up in Auckland a number of years ago. I personally had a terrible experience a number of years ago. It wasn't Roundup, it was malathion, which was somebody was using in their garden, spraying their tomatoes. I got terribly sick, and so I was quite closely involved in quite a lot of the issues that we're facing, how pesticide use in our country has grown. I think I'd be very, very keen to find some other organic alternatives. There's plenty of them out there, and I'd be certainly advocating for council to use those on all the parks. Dogs, children and people are all at risk, and I think even the timing of the way they're doing it is not necessarily particularly sensitive. So I think it's a really good issue to keep supporting new ways of doing stuff.
Kinja, great answers. And have you got any points or issues that you'd like to raise for the people?
I guess there's a few key ones for me, Graham. I mean, because of my involvement in community housing since setting up the Housing Trust those years ago, did people know that only 1% of all the housing in Nelson actually belongs in the community sector? In many OECD countries, the community housing provision can be a really genuine alternative to the government state housing and or the private market. And invariably in the community housing sector, it's much more affordable. The Housing Trust, for instance, rents houses out at 80% of the market rent, which makes it hugely more manageable for especially low and even medium income families who are working. So, that's certainly one of the things that I think we need to develop, is a much more viable community housing sector and offering more affordable options. Homelessness has been a big issue, and again the Housing Trust, and there's about 9 agencies that are involved in an emergency housing provision, and we've just recently kind of re-established it. So it closed for a while because we were prevented from staying at Tuhununui Motor Camp. So the ways in which we respond to those most vulnerable of people is a real measure of how successful really a city is.
Sure.
Yeah. I think the other one, of course, is the ways an old mantra of mine is the ways in which we add value to what we already have. The investment that our council has made in partnership with the government around our cycleways, shared pathways, improving the public transport, all of those options have really changed the way in which we move about our city. There's still so many more really viable options which won't cost a lot and are hugely more beneficial than just another road. So yeah, I think it's time we invested hugely more in those. Like, get on with the Rocks Road improvements that have been organised, planned, budgeted. There's $16 million sitting in that fund waiting to be spent.
Nice. Kinja Douglas, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Graham. Thank you.
And good morning everyone, especially to Councillor Matheson. Nice to see you as well. Really good to see you bounce back. I want to talk about the Stoke Centre, and you've got a paper in front of you today which has got 2 bits of bad news really on that. One, another budget overrun, so that's the second one that's happened even before a sod of dirt has been turned on it. And the second bad bit of bad news, of course, is the St Barnabas land not being available. So those 2 factors actually weigh against the project again. And I think really when you weigh up what's happened on that project since it started, it's a good time for a review. And I'm suggesting today that this whole project should be left for the new council that comes in, and it should be subject to review to see whether the original objectives are going to be met by it, because it's now looking to be a very, very expensive project. One of the things that has happened, of course, is the effect of the resource consent conditions, and they seem to have been sort of brushed aside and ignored. But when you have a resource consent that says that during the rugby and cricket season, which is most of the year, on a Saturday, you can't have more than 50 people use this facility other than the sports people, then the whole utility of it has really been compromised. And this idea of it being a community centre and unavailable really to any sort of significant community event on the most likely day of the week, you have to weigh that up as well. So you've now got something which is blown out on cost. You've got something where the utility of it's been severely compromised, and any sort of development might have happened alongside it with land is now not going to happen. So I think you really need to take a good look at it and just start and it should be put back to the new council, give them a chance before you go ahead with something that's as significant as this. The other query I have around it is the status of user agreements. And I know as of a week ago, at least one of the major users hasn't signed its agreement yet, and maybe Mr. Ward can give you an update on where those user agreements are, but you'd be foolish to go ahead with this and agree to go ahead with it without those user agreements in place. You're going to have no negotiating leverage at all if they're not in place. You know, if you don't have some underpinning foundation users, you know, the whole this looks more and more like a project built on sand. And we haven't. Some time ago, I suggested you actually do a business case on this as well, and that's never happened. So I'm suggesting that this goes to the next council and proper review on it before you get any more committed. The budget situation is really sad, and it drives the hell out of me. You know, when the annual plan came out last year, the budget was 5.6 million. Within weeks, before the ink had even dried on the plan, it had increased to 6.1 million, and now it's 6.5. All of those increases are unbudgeted. I guess they come from the pots of money that are sitting around all over the place, but it's not as if the budget wasn't fulsome to start with. And that's one of the things that has always puzzled me about this whole project, is that when you look at it on comparables, it's a horrendously expensive building. Its current cost is $4,600 per square metre, which is way above any other metrics that you'd see for comparable buildings. And you know, if I look at other buildings around, Golden Bay Community Centre is going to be $4 million. And that's a bigger building, it's far more useful. It's actually got a sports hall where you can play basketball and stuff. This building's just like a medical centre or something. It's just got a whole bunch of rooms, meeting rooms. There's nothing that's actually all that utilitarian about it. Aranui Community Centre down in Christchurch, and this is Christchurch building rates where you know, they're all inflated. That's just come in at 5.9 million. And again, it's another building which has got a sports hall with it and a whole lot of utilitarian areas. Well received by the community down there. They're all excited about it because they've involved youth. I've seen the opening ceremony and everyone was excited. There's no excitement around about the Stoke Centre. I've never seen a proposal like this that has generated so little interest. No one is actually excited about this because it hasn't ever had grassroots support. It's never come from grassroots. It's something that's really been imposed on the community rather than actually come out of the community. And again, I look at Mootry Hills, fantastically successful community centre. I don't know whether anyone's been there. You should get on a bus and go out and talk to the people out there, have a look at it, see how it works. It works fantastically well. I've talked to the people out there. They're thrilled about it. They have weddings, they have all sorts of stuff there.